For 6 years, the night sky over London offered nothing but a threat from above. To survive the Blitz, the entire city was forced into a mandatory nightly blackout. Princess Elizabeth was just 13 years old when the war broke out. Instead of experiencing a normal adolescence, the heir to the throne spent the conflict confined behind the thick stone walls of Windsor Castle, kept far away from the dangers of the city. Near the end of the war, she did manage a brief foray into military service. She joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army, spending 3 weeks training as a mechanic and driver. But even in a khaki uniform, she was still the future monarch. Royal protocol, guards, and intense scrutiny maintained a strict physical barrier between her and the general public. Her entire youth had been defined by heavy duty and high walls. She had missed out on the simple act of having fun, building up a quiet, intense pressure to finally experience life outside the palace gates. Then came May 1945. Nazi Germany surrendered, and for the first time in over half a decade, London turned its streetlights back on. The relief poured instantly into the streets. Hundreds of thousands of people converged on central London in a euphoric wave of red, white, and blue, celebrating victory in Europe. Prime Minister Winston Churchill took to the radio, officially granting the exhausted nation permission for a brief, hard-won period of rejoicing. High above the swirling masses, the royal family stepped out onto the Buckingham Palace balcony to wave at the crowds. But the palace had switched on its massive floodlights. Staring into the harsh glare, Elizabeth and her younger sister Margaret realized they were completely blinded. They could hear the roar of the party below, but they were trapped on the wrong side of the light. Looking at his daughters, King George VI recognized the physical distance between them and their future subjects. He knew they had never experienced normal fun, so he issued an unprecedented royal directive, giving them permission to leave the palace. A discreet party of 16 people, including the 2 teenage princesses, slipped out of the palace doors and vanished directly into the surging crowds. The 19-year-old heir was petrified. Hoping to hide her highly recognizable face, Elizabeth tugged the visor of her military cap deep down over her eyes. As she later recalled, "I remember we were terrified of being recognized." That disguise immediately hit a snag. A strict officer in their escort flatly refused to be seen walking alongside a soldier who was improperly dressed. He forced the future queen to push her hat back up, risking her total exposure. They plunged into Whitehall anyway. The sisters experienced immediate sensory overload, linking arms with complete strangers and letting themselves be swept along by a massive tide of exhausted, happy people. The royal escort got completely caught up in the absurdity of the moment. One man in their party somehow swapped hats with a Dutch sailor and had to chase him through the throng just to get it back. Nobody noticed them. Surrounded by cheering workers and off-duty soldiers, the rigid expectations of the monarchy dissolved. For the first time in her life, Elizabeth was entirely ordinary. The group continued their march deeper into the city, eventually arriving at the notoriously formal Ritz Hotel. Shedding all remaining royal decorum, the teenagers did exactly what teenagers do. They joined a massive conga line, dancing their way right through the front doors of the high society establishment, through the lobby, and straight out the other side. Back on the paper-littered streets, the chaos escalated. Complete strangers hugged and kissed, crying openly while dancing the hokey-cokey in the middle of the road. The future monarch of the British Empire was freely bouncing along to a Latin American dance import alongside everyday citizens, entirely invisible in plain sight. By 3 in the morning, the adrenaline finally began to fade. The group made the long, quiet walk back across Green Park toward home, their temporary freedom coming to an end. But instead of going straight inside, Elizabeth stopped outside the Buckingham Palace gates. Blending into the dense crowd one last time, she looked up at the balcony and joined the chorus of commoners chanting, "We want the king," demanding an appearance from her own parents. It was an inversion of the classic fairy tale. The clock struck, the magic faded, and instead of leaving an ordinary life behind to enter a palace, She left her brief taste of normality to return to a lifetime of duty. Fast forward 75 years. As the UK faced the dark, isolated lockdowns of the 2020 pandemic, a 94-year-old Queen Elizabeth addressed the nation to remind them of the profound joy she witnessed in the crowds on VE Day. Sitting quietly on the desk beside her during that broadcast was a subtle piece of evidence, the exact same cocky military cap she had pulled down over her eyes in 1945. A quiet nod to the few hours she spent as a regular teenager, and proof of a night she never forgot.